So good evening from Jerusalem, and I know I'm saying good morning to our friends to the west of us from South America to North America. And I'm Rabbi Stacey Blank. I am the Director of Education and Leadership Development for the World Union for Progressive Judaism, and very, very honored to be hosting this gathering. Our topic perhaps is a little, it's challenging, and these are challenging times, but we don't want to be afraid to talk about difficult topics. And I do hope actually our meeting today with Gidi Dar, the creator of Legend of Destruction, Agadat Choban, together with Rabbi Josh Weinberg, who I'll introduce in a moment from URJ and Artsakh, that this will be a discussion that will help us all going forward. So the WPJ mission is to connect between people and communities, to offer support, and to be a platform for new ideas. So it's really good to see people here from around the world. And we do hope that sharing this film will be a support for connecting with our Jewish history and tradition surrounding Israel and Tisha B'Av, and that we can provide you with a resource that will help you in your flourishing community lives. And the conversation and the film on which it is based is, in my opinion, a fantastic and unique work of art and storytelling, which I don't think has quite ever been done before, certainly on the topic of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, and where we are today. So we were very happy to be a part of this project, as it connects to a lot of our core values. And we hope that from this discussion, we will learn, and that we will find our approach to Judaism, our progressive reform approach, through the innovation, creativity, through being able to look with a loving, critical eye at our beliefs and our traditions, and to integrate our internal values of Judaism with intent and purpose, as we recognize diversity and promote pluralism. And I might add the question, which I'll leave for the end. Part of our Judaism is also asking the question, where is God in all of this? So I'll leave that for the end. And I want to invite my friend and colleague, Rabbi Josh Weinberg, to say a few words.
Josh?
I saw he was with us.
Hi.
Oh, there he is. There you are. Okay.
I apologize. One second.
I can't hear you.
We don't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
All right. All right. I was having some connectivity issues. I apologize. Thank you so much. And it's really wonderful to be together with all of you. And first of all, I want to thank the World Union for their partnership and for the ability for us to do this together. I think that's important at times such as these.
Oh,
We okay?
okay.
Okay. So maybe we'll just remind people to mute. Okay, we're good. One of these days we'll get a hang of this Zoom. Okay, we back on?
У меня нет здесь наушников.
I am trying to mute everybody except for our speaker. Please mute yourselves.
Yeah. Maybe if there's someone who can put that message in Russian, also, that will be helpful. Hey, global. So again, my thanks to the World Union, and thanks to all of you for this collaboration. It's really important. And I just want to also thank our movie's producer, Gidi Dar, who I've been in conversation with, and who, if you haven't seen one of his previous films, Ushpizin, it's great to use around the holiday of Sukkot. Really, really incredible production that tells the story that brings this issue to life right now. I want to build a little bit on what Rabbi Blank was saying by a few things. First of all, we have this holiday or this day of Tisha B'Av coming up. And I think that in many of our Reform congregations, it's a day that's not as widely celebrated or widely marked as I think it could be potentially. We should be angry at the Romans for destroying the temple during the summer months when most of our people are not necessarily around. And makes it harder to celebrate or harder to bring people together. I'm actually coming to you from one of our Reform Movement summer camps, in which Tisha B'Av has always been sort of a standard day on the calendar in which we come together to mark it. And it's fascinating how this day has evolved over time. When people used to do things that I think often, would now looking back have traumatized some of our campers and some of our young people, to trying to figure out new and creative ways of marking the day. So part of what this movie offers, The Legends of Destruction, or Agadat HaChurban, is a little bit of a window into that world that was destroyed on the 9th of Av, or in the days and weeks leading up to that. Of course, we're now marking this evening, the 17th of Tammuz, which was the day in which we laid the siege into the temple, and it's a 3-week period that we mark with mourning. Is it hard to hear? I'm sorry.
I think it might be by you, Abe. I hear just fine. So please continue.
Right, I apologize. But what I want to say is that, especially as the Reform movement, and those of you who are aware of the history of the Reform movement and our great efforts to really disassociate ourselves from anything that had to do with the temple in Jerusalem. We took it out a lot of our liturgy. We don't spend a lot of time in synagogue recreating in great detail some of the rituals that took place, especially like the Birkat HaKohanim, the blessings of the priestly clan, and lots of other things that more traditional congregation, more traditional Jews do adopt as a way of sort of continuing on that legacy from the Beit HaMikdash. And for many of the result was that world is largely lost to us. And so the first thing I want to say is I want to thank Gidi for helping to make that come alive, really. In Hebrew, and to really build the continuity between what was the temple, what was the world, what did it feel like, what did it smell like, what was the sensory experience of us standing there amidst a mass, hundreds of thousands of Jewish people, or B'nai Yehuda people from all over the region coming on pilgrimage holiday, and then to realize that sometimes their world was not altogether so different from our existence today. And that how many of you have heard over the last, let's say, year and a half, even in the pre-October 7th world, when Israelis were pouring out into the streets over the issue of democracy and judicial reform, up until now, where there are some really difficult issues, really difficult, how do we say in Hebrew, machlokot, right? Deep divisions in society about what's the right approach, what should be the role of our leaders, how should we handle internal threats, how should we handle external threats. I think that the film touches succinctly on these exact issues and is used as a prism, or is used as a tool for us to be able to have those conversations one with another. And I think that there's really no better day to do that, is to dedicate our time on the 9th of Av, on Tisha B'Av, to be able to use this as a tool to connect us both to the past and to say, wow, these are exact, the conversations that they were having 2,000 years ago are the exact same conversations that we're having here today. And my hope is that we in the Reform movement can be able to take, take this film and use it as a tool for enabling our members, our congregants, our community members, and our people in our network, to be able to work some of this out between us and to say, what do we do when we have divisions in society? How do we avoid the tragic ending that we saw that took place 2,000 years ago? I think that we hold that up as a warning to us. Oftentimes we use the notion that the temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, because of this senseless hatred. Just think about yourselves in the last 9 months. How many of you would say you experienced some of that senseless hatred, whether directed to you or just what you're feeling in general? And how do we both avoid that and avoid what that then causes, which was this destruction of not just a building, right? The temple wasn't just a physical structure, but it was really the focal point of the most important things of society, namely learning, Jewish education, Torah, and commerce, right? The entire society revolved around that one locale, that one location. How do we think about Israel being the center of our lives or not? All these massive questions come about in the film. And again, my deep thanks to Gidi and to his production team for bringing this up and for also making discussion questions available to us. And I hope that really it produces fruitful learning for all of you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Josh Weinberg. And I want to introduce now Gidi Dar, who is the creator of Legend of Destruction, Agadat Choban. I want to preface it by saying that when the movie came out in Israel in Hebrew 3 years ago, I went to go see it in the movie theater, in the cinema, on Tisha B'Av with my children. And for me, it was a very powerful way to observe the day. Also, being someone who lives in Jerusalem, living in the place where the destruction happened, and then living in the Jerusalem of rebirth, where life is around us, and you can find conflict in every corner, and to imagine the fragile balance that we live in today and this year, as Rabbi Weinberg mentioned, to have that balance deeply disturbed. So I want to introduce Gidi. We're going to ask him some questions to get some background about the film. And you're welcome to write your questions in the chat, and we'll incorporate them into the discussion to give us some background, give some insight into the film. And you could still consider to bring it to your community for Tisha B'Av, and to receive the discussion guide that will be ready in a few days. And so Gidi Dar is the creator of Legend of Destruction. He is also, as Rabbi Weinberg mentioned, the writer and director of the tremendous film Ushpizin in 2004, which was very popular in the US and Israel, and the director-producer of Eddie King, which was a prize winner at the Locarno Film Festival of 1992. He also wrote and directed the award-winning young adult series, The Kids from Napoleon Hill and Deus, and the documentaries Shine and The Last Wilderness. So Gidi, thank you so much. I'm going to turn the spotlight over to you after I ask my first question. Where did you receive the inspiration for this film? Also, the idea of the story and of the artistic conceptualization, because I think both of those components are what makes this film extremely unique.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for what you were saying, both of you, Rabbi Stacey and Rabbi Weinberg. And I really think I totally identify with Rabbi Weinberg about the need to grasp this day, to have a better understanding of this date of in the calendar. And it's funny, I do accuse the Romans for doing it in the summer. You could have chosen an easier time for destroying, but even in that, they were pretty bad to us. Although we also chose, part of the story is that we did most of it to ourselves. That's part of the tragedy in this story. But I think that, just to touch something before I answer the question, if you don't mind, that You know, when you were speaking, I thought that, you know, Passover, for example, is a holiday that is going with us the whole year. You know, because it's a mythological moment of creation of the nation from a people of slaves, and there is a message very clear and very positive. And this is like the other side of it, Tisha B'Av, because it's like the less known one and the less talked about. Although it goes out all the way. Every wedding we break a glass. You know, when we pray, if you're praying, then you pray 3 times a day for next year in Jerusalem. It all relates to that. It's also as central as Passover, and yet it's like we kind of ignore it. And I think it's the most relevant date we have in this era, because it talks about, as you said, you both mentioned, it talks about really what's happening to us today in a stunning accuracy. If you think about what the Talmud is talking 2,000 years ago, and the sages, it's like as if they're sending us a message through 2,000 years of exile. You know, learn what happened to us. Here are the legends, the tales. It's not exactly legends; they're based in reality, and learn very well what happened to us. Because if you won't learn it, it's going to happen to you. No matter if you're in Israel or if you're in America, and so that's something I wanted to address too. Now, as to, I'm afraid my answer will be less spiritual now to your question, Rabbi Stacey, because you know, in Israel, when you're Kita Yud, it's about when you're about 16 in high school, you study this topic of Second Temple era and the destruction era, and so everybody learn it, and almost everybody forget all about it. It's a really sophisticated, complicated issue with a lot of trends and a lot of ideas and political ideas and economical ideas and the Tzedakим and the Prush and the Pharisees and the you know, the Christians and everybody mix the high priesthood. It's like really, really complicated. The Romans, and kids cannot really get it when it's written. And a few years ago, it was 2013, when I actually, just a minute before I started the movie, I read a book about it, about Josephus Flavius, just a book which I actually never read again. And I was shocked of how little I remembered about this story. As a secular Israeli guy, I barely remembered a thing. I just heard Sinat Chinam and all that. I didn't remember how far did they go. And I remember at the same time, the Arab winter was taking place in Syria, full power. And I thought, wow, they were like as bad as these guys, maybe even worse. It's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable story, and it's unbelievable that I don't remember it. And it's just like this story changed everything in the Jewish history, the history of the world. You know, Christianity, I'm not even sure it would have existed without that at this moment. Then I started, you know, when something really troubles me, I begin to do, I'm considering doing a movie about that. And so actually the beginning of the inspiration is ignorance, the recognition in how ignorant I was. And I started researching it, and I thought, I'd actually, to be honest, I wanted to do I was planning to do a documentary, a small documentary. I said, I'll just do a very quick one, you know. And the problem was that there was nothing to film besides talking heads. Because you have the Kotel, the Wailing Wall, and some small archaeology, not too much even, and that's it. And how many times can you watch the same archaeology? Then I said to myself, why don't I use like those paintings to show it? And then I connected with David Polonsky and Michael Fowles, which are the artists who made the movie, and which are 2 amazing geniuses. And they agreed to step in, which was great for me. And we started, and we made some tests. And the more we went, and I'm mostly in fiction, narrative movies and shows. And we started working on it. And the more we worked, the less just testing it, we saw it's working. It's crazy. It's really amazing to see that it's like, I had my actors in the Hebrew with some great actors, Israeli actors, doing it. And we felt it actually can work, this crazy style of working with steel paintings And I didn't feel at all like jumping out to Talking Heads from there. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to do a fiction movie out of it. I'm going to do a narrative movie. And I changed, and I managed to talk to the film funds and TVs who were involved and say, okay, let's go for it. And the budget, of course, became much bigger. And I thought I'm going to finish it in a year. It took me 8 years. and we ended up with this crazy style and this crazy, crazy, crazy story. And I was researching it all the time as I was progressing and writing, and it was a very, very different process than normal films. It's not like you write, you produce, you get the money, and then you go and shoot it, and then you edit it. It wasn't like that. It was like all the time ongoing process of writing, changing, painting. I'll maybe show you some stuff later if you want some visual stuff. I have, if you let me share the screen later. And it was an ongoing process which took 8 years. So it was a roller coaster. And in the process of which I became an expert to the subject. And so but the beginning of it was very practical issues. First of all, I found myself ignorant, and it pissed me off. And the other thing is that I started the documentary, and I had to find some solution how to do it. But that's a great thing about art, that the road that leads you is bigger than you. And the movie is such a big thing. It shows you something. It shows you the road. It shows you the way, and it leads you. And at the end of the day, I'm the soldier of the film, not vice versa. I'm working for the film to get it done. That's at least the way I see the process of movies. You learn from the reality of what you're dealing with, and you just in a kind of a tai chi, you go with it, and you let it be. So I hope this answers the question somehow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gidi, so much. We said that it was released in Israel, and of course, such big names as like Shuli Rand and Amos Tamam, who are some of the voices that I think an Israeli crowd would recognize even without seeing them. How was it received in Israel, and how has that reception changed this year versus maybe when it first came out? Do you think, like this year on Tisha B'Av, how do you think it's going to play out in Israeli society?
Well, when the film was released in Israel, it was about to be released. Everybody kept on telling me, you got to release the movie now because things, okay, let me go one step backward, please. So as I said, I started 2013. It looked nothing like the Israeli reality. It looks like more the Arab winter reality. But since the process was very long, so we started 2013, 2015, 16, 17, the reality started to glide in not a very nice way, the Israeli reality, into serious divisions and serious mistrust in the politics and some corruption issues, which were very big. And there were cracks in the reality, in the political and social reality of Israel. And the anger became more and more, and it became more and more like the movie. It was pretty terrifying. And in 21, we had, if you remember this, now it looks like small war. It's called Shomer Chomot. I don't remember the word for it in English, 21. And we had...
Yeah, Operation Guardian of the Walls, but yeah.
What's the name of it how do you call it in English?
Guardian of the Walls.
Okay. And this war was like it was different than the other operation or small mini wars in Gaza, because it also penetrated inside Israel with mixed cities in Israel where citizens, Arabs and Jews, were fighting in the streets. And funny enough, weird enough, it was also in cities, mixed cities, which were at the time, in the year 66 CE, when it all started then, was the same cities, like Acre, for example. And then it was the Jews versus the pagans. And I looked at that, and then I said, wow, it's really happening. I can't believe it. And people say, you got to push the film, you got to release it now, very quickly. And I said, you know what? I'm afraid it's just there's still a long way to the bottom, and unfortunately, and there's no rush. And then, if you remember, there were elections. There was many elections rounds. And the tension was terrible. And then Bennett was the Bennett government was, and the inauguration was like there was a scene in the Knesset which looked exactly like the scene where, if you remember, the scene those who you'll see in the movie, there is a scene where the high priest make a big convention to decide what's going to be. It looks exactly the same like the Knesset. You could just put the soundtrack of the Knesset on that, or do the vice versa, and it would like look totally realistic. And then we released the film, and the reactions were amazing, because I mean we had a problem because we were in the Corona Delta was full power, but the reactions were amazing. First of all, I insisted on releasing in Tisha B'Av, and for the first time in the history of Israel, I think because of the campaign of the film, everybody started addressing it seriously. Also in the secular radios and TVs and media, everybody started addressing it because of the film, and because that the film was talking about exactly about that, and everybody was sure that I did the film about now. And I told them, no, I did it about 2,000 years ago. It's the sages who are talking about now, not me. And so the reactions were great, to reflect the situation, which wasn't great. And people saw it as a
people
kind of
found
a
it meaningful, is what you're saying.
Yeah, very meaningful, and also like a prophecy, like a warning light to reality, to the Israeli reality. I actually had a call from Naftali Bennett, the prime minister, and he talked to me for 40 minutes about the movie, and he freaked out from the movie, and he said something wonderful to me. He said that the thing he loved most in the film was that everybody were right. He said, everybody are right in your movie. Everybody has something reasonable to say. He said, I see it every day as a prime minister. People come to me from the right, from the left, and they all have a reason behind them. The only problem is that they don't agree with each other at all, and each one is pushing to a different direction. And I said, so I complimented his sentence, said, everybody were right all the way to hell. And so the understanding that I have, for me, the main message, the main social, political message, or also spiritual, of the film is that to be right is not enough. Because the basics of society is the ability to compromise. Just like in a family, when you can have a quarrel or machloket with your brothers, your sisters, or your parents, and you don't want to destroy them. You want to solve it. And if you don't, the family breaks down. And so that was something that I think people understood. Both and the interesting thing is that people reacted very strongly to the film, both from the right wing, the left wing, the religious, and the higher, the modern Orthodox, the very right wing modern Orthodox, and the very left liberals. They all agreed. I said to myself, that the modern Orthodox, or the Orthodox, loved the film because they knew the legends, but they never saw them connected all together into one big experience. And the liberals, leftists, like it because they didn't know the legends. Because they, like me before, they didn't know almost nothing about the film. So the reaction was very strong, and the politicians also jumped in and talked about it from all around. I don't think, unfortunately, it didn't influence enough. Okay, so on that. So it continued, and situation got worse, and people keep saying your film is keep on fulfilling itself more and more and more and more. It does. And now, after 7th of October, it remains to see. We have to see this Tisha B'Av, what's going to be. By the way, in this Tisha B'Av, we have this worldwide event that we're all speaking about. And one of the central points, a few days before, in Aseret Hayamim, we have a big screening in Migdal David, in the courtyard, in the place itself. It's very, as Rabbi Stacey said, it's really powerful when you finish the film and you look around and you say, wow, I'm in the real place. It's unbelievable.
Gidi, let's take now the film to abroad, because so now the film was just released with the English in the English dubbing with phenomenal actors.
Yes.
What, I don't know if it's already been shown already, if you already have a sense of how what is similar and what is different when people see it who are not Israeli, or we can touch on Jewish audiences. I don't know if there are non-Jewish audiences that have viewed the film, and if it's still just getting started, and we're a part of that by showing this on Tisha B'Av, then what you might anticipate.
So
what
I
you
had
might
one
say
screening
to people abroad.
Well, I don't know what I'm going to say. I can tell you that there was one screening in Manhattan, the Manhattan JCC, for liberal left audiences. I think I can define it generally. There were a few also from other places, other denominations. And I got to admit that the reaction were like very strong and surprised me. I was worried that they would be very different. It wasn't that different. It was Jewish audience. Okay? It wasn't that different. I think they were very worried about Israel. This crowd was involved with Israel. It cared about Israel, and I think the audience also related over there a bit more to the point that there is something in the movie which could be used as a metaphor for the general situation of the world today, of democracies. I think the issue of divisions, that's something I heard from the audience. The issue of divisions is something that is not specific to Israel. I mean, it's very dangerous in Israel, but it's also very dangerous in other places. So, and I think the divisions in America, I mean, I do not pretend to know all the reasons and all that. I'm not an expert in American politics, but the divisions are very clear. You know, and the lack of compromises, and the lack of concept of compromising with each other and finding the way. I think something has become very radical on that. So people pointed on that too, and I did show it a little bit to Christian audiences, but not as a group, and they reacted. What I had a very strong reaction. We have to remember that the moment of the destruction is also a cornerstone in Christianity, not just in Judaism. Of course, more in Judaism, but it's a very important point. And the Jerusalem that we describe, which is the Jerusalem of Chazal, of the sages, is also very similar to the Jerusalem in the New Testament. It's not very different. So the concept of seeing the real Jerusalem, or it's not real, but, you know, feeling you're in, I think was powerful for all of them.
And what would you hope for a diaspora audience to take away from this film? If we showed an
Jewish audience,
a Jewish audience. Yeah, I'm thinking about the people who are joining us on this webinar, for instance, who I think will react differently to it than possibly the Israeli audience. But I will just mention, at least sitting myself in the United States, and I know this is an international crowd. Many in the United States are looking to, if you hadn't heard, there's going to be a presidential election in November. And there are some.
Didn't know that.
You should. Yeah, it's
not that important.
Breaking news.
It's not like election in Israel.
Yeah, right.
You're a small country. Don't forget that.
There are deep divisions in society right now. Of course, here, and I'm just sort of wondering, what you think, how you think, or what would you like to, how would you like this movie to be used for a diaspora audience, and what are some things that you would hope that we might take away from that?
Okay, so there is a division issue. I'm not giving lecture or I'm not educating anybody. I'm showing something about what happened when how dangerous can division become. That's one element of the film. But there is another element. If I'm talking about the Jewish audience for a moment, from all denominations, and maybe especially what is the more liberal denomination for a moment, because in Israel I actually address, I start the movie, and I'm thinking first about the secular audience, because that's my crowd. The result is many times that the modern Orthodox also join in. or maybe even more sometimes. But I'm thinking mainly about them. And when I'm thinking about America, I think that, for example, the reform, the progressive, the more liberal audiences, and you were mentioning in what you said before, is I would like, in a way, I feel that's part of my mission as a filmmaker, to connect the audiences to its own culture, to its own tradition, to its own narrative. I can tell you in Israel, they are very far off. It's part of even its origin is like in the very beginning of the establishment of Zionism, to go against diaspora, to rebel in diaspora and throw everything away, including all the culture, everything. And which in Israel it might have needed to happen, and I think it's important. It's going to change now in a way. But when I'm speaking about America, for example, I hope, the thing that I'm most proud about this movie is that I managed to take some ancient tales, which are in the essence, in the core of the Jewish tradition, and to make a very, very modern, cutting-edge movie out of it. And so people can connect to this story and say, wait a minute, that's my culture, actually. That's my narrative. Why don't I know about it? Why don't I know? Why have I heard about Oedipus and the Iliad and Odyssea and all this, but I never heard that there are legends in the Talmud and that they are so sophisticated and so dark?
That's like, we could say Dayenu, right? If we just use it to learn about our own past and our own heritage, okay. And then there's of course a message for us now.
Then there's what? The sound is not very good, so it's hard to
sorry, then there's a message for us today, right? In addition to learning about our past. Yeah.
By the way, I think that the message about our culture is for now. It's for now, because look what happens. Again, those sages 2,000 years ago saw some things that are super relevant to now. And we learn from it. We can learn from the past if we know it. It's things that can help us now, because part of the question, for example, in Israel, is a question of identity. I think all the conflict that we had, the judicial reform and all this, in the essence of it, it's a spiritual question of identity. That's what led everything. Had we been, for example, had and I'm not religious, but had the secular audience, secular public in Israel been more connected to its culture, things would have looked different. Not that I blame you for that, but I'm saying not at all. But then, because in Israel, what they said to the religious, say, you take the religion and get out of our faces. Okay, we don't see not you and not the Torah and not nothing. We just want to be like goy kechol hagoyim, and people, like all nations. Which that's something that the prophets always hated to hear, because we're not a regular nation. For the good, for the better or worse, we're not a regular nation, and we can't be. So I think the connection to our tradition in our own way. When I say connection, when I say in Israel connection to tradition, immediately they see ultra-Orthodox. I say, no, I want to stay secular. I don't want anybody to define for me what's Judaism, but being ignorant about my own culture, that's a problem. And about the current situation, I'll tell you what I think about the current, something very specific. We tend, all of us, including myself, we tend to blame the other side for everything. Okay, and what I would like us all to do is to think about ourselves. What am I doing? What am I doing that contribute to the conflict? What can I do to overcome it? Where can I reach out to the other side? No matter what is the other side, because he believes, and to assume that the other side is not evil, he's got his own perspective. And if I respect it, even if I don't agree with that, and he respects mine, there is a good chance we'll find some solution to it. If I don't respect it, if I don't listen to him at all, then we have a serious problem. We're not going to be able to solve anything. And when you don't solve, it's not static. It's getting worse.
Gidi, I want
So
to
that's something
ask
that
you, you mentioned in this really in-depth answer about getting to know the sources. And I was wondering if you could bring one example. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I feel there's two powerful things that play in your film here. It's the sources, the bringing alive our legends and the recorded history of Josephus Flavius, and the way you present it, the cinematic creativity. And you mentioned to me, the hundreds of sources, and you mentioned also the art, the classic art that inspired some of the frames. So could you give us one example of a legend in the film, and one example of how and why you used classic art, which is very universal. It's on one hand using very Jewish sources, and the other hand bringing in very universal art to inspire the frames.
So in the art, I can actually show you something in a minute, but in the legend, okay, so there are a few legends. Sometimes I take part of a legend. For example, in the beginning of the film, it begins in Yom Kippur, right? Day of Atonement. That's Masechet Yoma. Okay, and in the Masechet Yoma, there is a moment that they say that the gates of the temple opened by itself. Okay, and then Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai told the temple, everybody was scared. He said, I know, don't show off, or something like this. He says, Malachaki, we all know that there is a prophecy that you're gonna be destroyed. Okay, so we opened the door like that. But there is another one which could be more specific. If you remember, it starts when after the Yom Kippur, he's with his mother, and they come to collect the money, and he's angry, and then he goes in the street, and he's very bitter for what he sees, but in the street, that there's such poverty and so much money at the same time. People are so rich and so poor, and then he sees some poor people, and then he watches and he sees an entourage of a very fat, very rich man. His slaves are taking a silk carpet, and they put before him, so he goes naked, barefoot, to the temple, so he doesn't step the floor. And then right after, the poor people are fighting the rugs, what's left of it. Okay, so that's actually a legend of destruction about Nakdimon ben Gurion, who was walking in the street, and his slaves would do that, and the poor were fighting on the rugs. Okay, so that's a specific one. It's a very important one. Why? I have to say something about that, because that's the first act of the movie deals with that a lot. And that's something that at the beginning I didn't understand well enough. As the situation in Israel progressed, I understood it. It was amazing to understand it all of a sudden, that it dawns at you that corruption and big and huge gaps between many poor people and very, very rich people is the beginning of division. The beginning of what is known as Sinat Chinam, the self-hate. And that's what Chazal are saying. They say, Shayu avim et hamamon v'sonim ish et re'ehu, that they would love money and hate each other. That's also in those, and there are many legends about how rich people were and how they didn't address the poor. How they're not arvut adadit. No, how would you say it in English? Arvut adadit?
Mutual concern for one another.
Yeah. So, and that's what is very bitter. The main character is very bitter about that, and that's the issue. That's the beginning of the issue, because the rich and the high priesthood were cooperating with the Romans against their brothers. And one day it exploded. And then once it exploded, there was no way back. So that's an example for Legend of Destruction. Another
Great
one,
example.
very quickly, I'll say just one more. There's another one which I don't say anything about. I just show the smoke of the altar, which goes in straight line to the sky. It's like a pipe to God, And the legend is that no matter how strong the wind were, it never moved. And then I keep on showing it through the movie, and then on Yud Tammuz, which is today, actually, tomorrow, suddenly it get twisted and disappears. And I feel that's one of the most powerful, even if it's a very quiet moment, it's very powerful because it's really frightening because it was standing all the whole, and that's also alleged. There are many intertwined. And if you can I share it for
You
the
can
screen
share.
for a moment?
You can share. Yes, you're able to share.
So let me find it just before, so I won't do something embarrassing. Hold on 1 second. Okay, this is going to be funny a little bit.
While he's looking for the answer, when it's a question, it's in English now. Maybe someday there'll be a Spanish one, but right now it's in English. And if you're interested,
No, we're gonna have we're gonna have
Ah.
we're gonna have Spanish subtitles.
Okay, good to
If
know.
somebody wants it, we have it. Okay, this is just something funny because I had there was a big interview with me in Haaretz, and David, one of the painters, painted me on the balcony of the Queen of Bernice, wherever standing there looking at them bombing the city. So, these are the two painters also for an article they had. And I was like, there are two tourists in the ancient Jerusalem. I think it's lost, tired, sitting on the stairs. But I wanted to show something. Here is a moment as they fight with the rugs, if you can see that. But if you want to, very quickly, I can show you something like how we build the characters. It took us a while, for example, to find Ben Batif. So this is actually based on one of the painters, Michael. For a while, he looked like that, and then we tried to make him like this. And then they saw a guy and they painted him, say, well, that's the way it's going to look. But this he looks like a bit like a jihadic Islam, more this kind of. So we changed him a bit, and these paintings are grave paintings on coffins in ancient Egypt in the Fayum. It's a very famous painting from the time of Jews. So we took a lot from this style, and eventually built this guy. And then he had to lose weight. So that's the way it looks at the end, or it's the beginning. The end of the beginning of the film is the same moment. And that's all. And the same with Ben Zakkai. Like we try to find a guy, how would he look like? And that's Gordon, for example. All kind of characters we tried to use, and eventually I decided to go for Rabbi Fruman. Whoever knows him he had a huge laugh, and I loved his face, and I didn't want somebody very, very severe, so we ended with him in the movie. Same for Bernice. We were looking for Fayum for pictures, and we took all kinds of this Ronit Kabetz, which worked with me in movies. She passed away, and Siam Abbas. We're looking, and then we finally got to the. We were influenced from the Arab woman in Fauda, by the way. We used her. And this is the real Titus and Vespasian, the real status, and that's the way they look in the film. And also here, rich people, and here is the rich people. You can see them in the rich versus the poor in the temple. And so this style, which we influence. That's just I'm getting to the question you asked me. That's the way, by the way, that's the way we did storyboards. I used to sit with the painters, and we do a scene. That's the scene where he meets Bar Giora, for example. So we do all that, and then they go and do bigger sketches of it. And 1 second. And here, I hope I'm not boring you with that. Here is how we move the camera. You see? It's a long painting with the camera go ups and down, and go, and that's where they throw stones at the Romans. That's how it works. It's actually a huge painting that we go with the camera. Is the Roman attacking? But here I get to the, and here, by the way, this is a dream that we have. This is a scene of a dream. And I'm getting to the paintings. And here's that's how we build the painting. Look at that. You see, so we shot ourselves doing it. And then they painted on it. Or is Michael, the painter, with himself, and Bernice and Titus. That's how we find the poses. But here, for example, this is Monk. and this is Ben Zakkai dying, pretending to die. Okay, this is two. This is one classical painting versus our painting, and here this is Beacon. Okay, can you see that? That's the original, and that's us below. And this is Alma Tadema, and here is our party. The big one is ours, but it's based on Alma Tadema, which painted a lot of Hellenic and Roman paintings. And that's Titus. Okay, so yeah, we can stop sharing. So that's addressing the paintings. So it's a lot of art. It's we're going to end up doing some exhibition from that, and maybe even make a very big book about it, the era, like a big table book. But there's time for that.
Yeah, amazing. So I see that the questions we offer to open up the questions, people are asking about the film. So it sounds like you've done a really good job of sharing it with us and helping to arouse people's interest and curiosity. We have time for one more question, I think, before we end. Rabbi Josh, do you have a question, or should I?
No, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and hopefully we'll be able to spread this movie far and wide. And I just want to make sure that everyone here has an opportunity to ask.
Thank you very much, and thank you all of you for taking your time to be with me over here for the movie. And I really hope it will have its impact in America and the rest of the world. Let's see what it does.
Yes, just so you
You
know,
wanna
we
ask
have
something,
people. We have people here from
Mhm.
Argentina, people from the Netherlands, from France, from Russia. I saw Caribbean island there. So we are an international audience tonight. And before I end, you know, the movie, I don't think I'm giving away a spoiler when I say it doesn't end well. And it's always an interesting.
Well, I'm not sure. You know, Tarantino did. You know, in his Holocaust movie, he killed Hitler at the end. So you know, anything can happen. Let's see. I might re-edit it.
Okay, so that's keep us on our toes.
I don't think so.
But it's always a question: where do you end? Right? Where do you begin and where do you end? And it is a rabbinic tradition that when we talk about tragedy and when we talk about doom and gloom, also the prophets, but also in our midrashim, in our rabbinic stories, we end with a nechemta. We end with a consolation. And so before we end with,
is it always? Not always.
It's pretty. I haven't met one that did it.
For example,
it's a tradition.
give it.
Okay. It's a tradition.
Kamsa,
Never say always.
It ends terrible. No, but I mean, there are many in the Legend of Destruction. No, in the Legend of Destruction, many of them just end bad. Many of them just end bad. But I'll answer. Okay. I think I know what you're. Okay,
you know where I'm going.
I know where you're getting it.
Yeah,
I think so. I mean, ask this. So I say, just finish the question for everybody. So I make sure that's the question. If everybody hear it.
Do you have a nechemta for us? Do you have any words of consolation for us?
Okay, I'll tell you. You're asking in a bit different ways than I'm used to answer, so I'll answer like in a Jewish way. They asked me, why did you finish the film so dark? That's actually what you're asking me, right? Why is it so dark? Where is the nechemta? Okay? Where is the consolation? And, you know, since Spizen, I learned how to show the film while editing to audiences a lot. And understand that I need to react to the feedbacks. And they asked me, of course, I got this question many times. People were shocked. They're speechless at the end. They're like punched in the stomach. And they're left with nothing, just a dark screen as you go to the fire, and that's it. And I got a bit worried. They say, you got to say something, give some consolation, give some hope, man. And I got to be worried I became worried, and I was trying. And I tried everything. And I even tried to to end like this, but to add as a text of what happened with Ben Zakkai and Yavne, how the Jewish world survived this, and what the big change that Ben Zakkai did, which made him one of the most important Jewish figures, building the Talmud, the beginning of the Talmud, and the beginning of the Jewishness of the diaspora. But the film didn't let me, and I told you I'm listening to the film. I mean, not at first, not immediately, but when he forces me to listen, I listen. And the film told me, no, I'm done here. That's the moment. Whatever you do after this is not going to work very nice. It's going to feel like you didn't know where to end it. And then I understood something. I'm not giving you any consolation over here. I'm not sweetening the bitter pill at all. I actually would like to frighten the hell out of you. That's what I want to do. And the consolation is in somewhere else, because the film is a call for action. It's calling you. Were you frightened now? Do you feel that it could happen to you now? Then go and do something. Because those guys then didn't see the end coming. Otherwise, it would stop. So I want to show you that the end could come much quicker than you think, and much more devastating way that you might believe. And now is the time to act. Now, go and act. And that's a consolation. If you go and do that, then you give the consolation by yourself. That's your job. I mean, my job too, as a person. So I don't have any better answer than that. It ends dark, and that's it. Now go and do something.
Thank you, Gidi, so much. I'll just end with saying that we know the story that when the temple was destroyed, that the students of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai came to him and said, how do we go on with our lives? How do we continue living without a temple, essentially, without the Beit HaMikdash? And he responded to them in three words that he took from the prophet Hosea, in which he said, Chesed chafazti velo zavach. Sorry, 4 words. And he said, essentially, I want chesed, which we then translated as prayer, instead of sacrifices. And so I think that if that can be the lesson that we take out from this, and especially from Tisha B'Av, is that we want a world of chesed. And my hope is that all of you who share this with your communities can come away with that message, that what we want is chesed instead of violence or confrontation and conflict. And again, thank you so much for enabling us to use this as a tool.
Thank you all
for bringing it to our communities.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry if I didn't answer the question. I see that I couldn't take all of them. I might, I don't know if it stays. I'll say I'll react to it in a minute if I can.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, all of you.
So I want to also say thank you. I want to say thank you, especially to Gidi Dar, for giving us this incredible opportunity to share in this important film, which I think will spark a lot of discussion wherever it is shown. I want to thank the URJ and Rabbi Josh Weinberg for the partnership. And I had mentioned at the beginning, Gidi, you talked about yourself as a secular Israeli. And I asked, well, where is God? And I think that's a question that our communities may or may not want to ask when they see this film, a little bit like in the story of Esther, where is God in all of this? And the rabbinic legends do talk a lot about God. They give God a personification. So I want to end with the story, and maybe it's a nechemta, maybe not, maybe a consolation, maybe not. But the rabbis when they said, what did God do? The Holy One, blessed be He, when the temple was destroyed, that God summoned the ministering angels and said, what does a human king do when a relative dies and he mourns? What does he do? Like, it's as if God doesn't know, but he's asking, what does he do? And they said, he hangs sackcloth on his entrance. And God says, I'll do that too. And then he asked them again, a human king, what does he do? And they said, well, he puts out the lights in the house. And he says, okay, I'll do that too. And then he asks them again, what does a king do? They said he turns over the beds. He says, okay, I'll do that too. He asks them again, what does a king do? He says he walks barefoot. They told him he walks barefoot. He says, okay, that's what I'll do. And they keep going and going. What does a God asks, what does a person in mourning do? He rends his garments. He sits in silence. And finally, God asks, what does a human king do? And they answered, he sits and he weeps. And God says, this is what I will do. As it says in Isaiah, the prophet, the Lord God of hosts called on the day for weeping, for lamentations, and for removing your head covering. And here we have an image of God in mourning, God's sadness, not just angry. Maybe that's what God is angry that Jews have left God or have been engaged in sinat chinam and baseless hatred, but this is a God in mourning. And God asks what to do, I think, not because God doesn't know, but God also here demonstrates vulnerability. God demonstrates this feeling of helplessness, of loss. And we know that also when we go through this period of mourning, when we come after the shock, Gidi calls us to action. And we know that at some point we have to lift ourselves up and that we have to do something. Just like God, who engages in mourning, we engage in this experience of the film, and that we have a responsibility to act. And I do hope that this film and the discussions that follow will inspire us to do more, and not only as our individual communities, but to how we can bring our discussions to the global discussion about what do we do in the face of internal debate? What do we do in the face of polarization? What do we do in the face of anti-Semitism? What do we do for Israel and for the people of Israel? So as we begin this period of the 3 weeks now, we enter into the contemplation. We allow ourselves to be in that mourning period. And we invite everybody to engage in this film and to have these discussions and to be in touch going forward. So toda rabba. Gidi, do you want to have the final word?
So I'll just say one small thing about God, I mean, two things. I say, first of all, I'm one of those who thinks that God, if you believe in him, then he's so big that we know nothing about what he thinks. We cannot even imagine. So whenever we say he thinks this or he thinks this, we're already doing something which is kfirah, which is a bit heretic, because once we said it already, that's it. God thinks, that's already you're making a mistake because you don't know. Even Moses didn't know. But now that I said that, I'll tell you what he thinks. Now, I'm telling you from the Talmud, because I forgot where it was exactly, it says that when the people of Israel worshipped other gods, but they were together, he let them win. And in the second temple, where they're all super smart, super Talmid Chochem, all of them, and knew everything about the Torah, and as they say, they loved the money, but they hated each other. He finished the job. He said, okay, you're done. Because the main thing is that we stay a family of the people of Israel, a family of humanity, and wars exist and everything exists, but we should strive there. Find a way to be together. Because if we don't work together, especially I'm talking about the Jews now, then we're done. Even if it's ultra-Orthodox, we have problems with them, or the right wing, or the left wing, or whatever, they all have a point. And we should be able to speak with all of them. Thank you.
Gidi Dar, Agadat Choban, Legend of Destruction.
Thank you, and for your organization, for Josh, Rabbi Stacey. Thank you very much for helping this way and stepping in for this movie. Thank you. I highly appreciate it.
Okay, Laila Tov, Yom Tov,
Laila Tov,
everybody. Take care of yourselves.
Bye-bye. Thank you.